Hello and welcome to On to the Next Project. I'm Brian Miller.
And I'm Adam Krutinger.
And on this show, Adam and I have a weekly free-form conversation about building a living and a life with your passion.
And this week's topic is introverts and extroverts. And I know it's something that you've talked a lot about, Brian. So why don't we have you kind of fire it off?
Yeah, well, I came to this realization as a extrovert, right? You and I are both extroverts, and I think what we need to clarify first before we talk about this is what is an introvert, what is an extrovert, because otherwise the conversation doesn't even make sense if we don't clarify our terms. So there's a lot of people that think that introverts are shy, and that is not necessarily true. Some introverts are shy, and some shy people are introverts, but it's not necessarily one and the same. Kind of like um, not all rectangles are squares, right? No
Yeah.
squares are all squares are rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares, right? That kind of thing.
So why
So
don't we start off by kind of defining maybe the difference, just to make that kind of
yeah,
clear, because I could see why people would use those two words interchangeably. And I think
yeah,
I have in the past myself.
yeah, exactly. So introverts and extroverts are all about where they draw their energy. Okay. So that's what introversion and extroversion. It's just about where you draw your energy. So introverts draw their energy from alone time. They gain energy. They like power up with alone time and they drain while socializing. They drain while around others. It doesn't mean they don't enjoy being around others. It just means it drains their energy. Whereas extroverts like me and you, I actually gain energy. I power up the longer I'm around other people. And when I'm alone, I drain energy very, very quickly. So introverts need alone time to recharge. Extroverts need socializing to recharge.
Mm.
Nothing about that is about being shy, right? You can be an extrovert who gains energy from being around people, but still be shy. You may not know how to talk to others. And you can be an introvert who is shy. And I think shy introverts are kind of a tragic case. It's very, very difficult, right? But
Yeah.
by and large, it's just about where you draw your energy.
Interesting. Okay. So then how would we define being shy then?
I,
Pretty
I
self-explanatory, but I think we just for completeness.
Yeah, I think being shy is really just a difficulty in communicating with others, a difficulty in knowing how to talk to others and how to open conversations with strangers, with someone you're already not familiar with. I
Yeah.
think that's pretty much what shyness is.
Yeah, and I'll kind of add to that too. It's probably a little bit more self-conscious,
Mm.
uh, being shy rather than introvert is just like not even really wanting to, rather than something you can control versus something you can't control. So yeah, no, I think that's a good place to jump into it further. Then, so yeah,
Yeah, so the reason that I kind of wanted to get onto this topic is that there's the big problem is that we think there's so many more extroverts, right? If you ask the average person, you're going to say, do you think there's more extroverts or introverts what in the world? What do you think the breakdown is? I would bet most people would say it's like 80% extroverts and like
mm,
20% introverts or even more. It's not the case. It's been studied across cultures and it's about 50-50, like everything else in the world. It's about half and
yeah.
half. And you think, well, why does it seem like there's so many more extroverts? It's because we're loud. We're the ones talking and taking over parties and taking over conversations. So you just notice extroverts a lot more. And the reason I wanted to bring this up within the context of this podcast is what happens is introverts, who are about 50% of the population. So whether you're at a company, it's about 50% of the people you work with, your personal life, your social life, what happens is these are often brilliant people. They're bright people. They have great ideas, creative ideas, perspectives that are valuable in conversations and contribute to creative conversations and solutions and problem solving, but we don't hear from them because the extroverts are too busy talking over them. And I believe the onus is on extroverts to learn how to make space for introverts in order to improve our entire creative process by getting those perspectives, by
One
hearing what they
question
have
I'd
to say.
have to that though is 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 giving them space enough? Given that space, will they also take advantage of it to contribute?
So that's a great question, and I'm thinking about my wife a lot right now, and she wouldn't mind me saying this, Lindsay, because I wrote about this in my book in Three New People, and I wrote about it specifically in an early chapter about introverts and extroverts because my wife is kind of an archetypal introvert, and what she'll tell you, and most introverts you talk to will tell you, that yes, they will take advantage if they're given space, but over the course of their life, they've been beaten down with so many negative experiences where they just get talked over or interrupted that it takes a lot of trust for them to be willing to use that space, because what they're worried about is kind of like this reflex of, well, I'm finally, after an hour of people screaming over each other at a dinner party, I'm finally, there's a moment, there's a window, I get to say my thing. And what they're worried about is that they're going to start giving their opinion, and within seconds some extrovert is just going to cut them off, interject, and just take over the conversation. And after all that time, then they're like, well, why even bother? Right. And they've had that happen so many times. I think what we need to do is not only give them space, but make sure that we're creating environments where there's an understanding that everybody gets their time, that everybody is given respect and dignity and and empathy and kindness to have their moment.
So one thing I'm thinking of though, so like in order to solve this problem in a group, because one thing you see all the time, because I'm part of lots of meetings for many different reasons, what used to be in-person meetings as well. And again, yeah, you'd have your extroverts barking for a while, and again, that makes it sound like a negative thing too. Extroverts also have a lot of good things to
Mhm.
contribute, but and then they always open up the floor. Okay, anyone have anything else to say? And almost always, it's just silence for a while. And they're like, okay, that's it. Let's wrap it up. So I think, and now again, like we say this every time, it answers a little bit both ways. So because it's not, I think it's more than just giving introverts an opportunity and a safe place to do it, as much as it is also on extroverts to, I mean, they also equally need some sort of uh I don't know, I don't want to say training, but
Mhm.
uh yeah, training, I guess, to just check themselves too.
I That's exactly what I'm saying, is that it is always, I believe the responsibility always falls to the group that's dominating a conversation to be the ones to make the effort to reach way further, right? I mean, to reach 90% and let the other group come 10% of the way, right? If if I'm part of a group that's dominating a conversation, and I see that, like if I'm in a social gathering and like there's six of us and five of us are extroverts for some reason, we just happen to be in that group, and we're just talking and talking and talking. You've been in those groups, and then there's one person, there's that friend that's an introvert, and so they're quiet. And it's not that they're quiet because they have nothing to say, they're quiet because they are not aggressive in conversations the way that we are. They're not willing to interject. Oh, this is a big thing. So I'll tell you, right from my wife and right from a lot of introverts I've talked to, Susan Cain wrote an entire global bestseller about this called Quiet. It's a must read for all extroverts if you want to understand this problem. What happens is introverts have this idea that they're unwilling to say anything unless they're sure that it's going to be valuable. And so what happens is extroverts, we have a tendency to work our ideas out loud, right?
Yeah.
You'll do it, I'll do it. I'll just start talking, having no idea if it's going to end up being valuable, and I'll figure it out as I talk. Whereas my wife will wait and think to herself, is this worth saying? Is this worth somebody else's time? Am I really convinced this is going to be valuable? And by the time she's convinced herself it is, one, we've moved the conversation on to three new points and she missed it. Or two, she finally starts talking and then someone cuts her off, which to her isn't part of the energy of the room. Like you and me might feel like, oh, that's just part of the energy. To her, it's really rude. It's saying that I think my opinion is more valuable than yours, and I was willing to cut you off for it. And
Mm.
that misunderstanding between the two different groups, I think it's on us, the ones who do the cutting off, to to like you said, not just give the space,
Yeah.
but bring it out.
Sure, and I want to do a little counterpoint to there too, just to help flex out these ideas, because it sounds like we're talking kind of about responsibility,
Mhm.
and extroverts have a responsibility to kind of be a little bit more introvert, and to have empathy for it. And I guess my question is there also some responsibility on introverts to also try to meet us halfway? Because the ideal is to have both people kind of at the same, again, not that that's completely possible, but equally as we're putting, I feel like we're kind of putting a lot of pressure on the extroverts where there is, I think in many cases, introverts need a little bit more encouragement to be a little bit more extrovert too.
And I think there's a good argument to be made for, each side of this needs to do some compromising, or maybe not even compromising, just some. I mean, it's not really a compromise. It's kind of like just it's manners, if anything else. Like it could just be it's just good manners, but it's also, I think what extroverts need to realize is the quote compromise isn't really a compromise. What you're actually doing is you're gaining quite a lot from getting those perspectives to come into the conversations, perspectives you'd never hear from. And introverts, I think, equally could see that them getting not aggressive, but a little bit more willing to put their foot down, or when they get interrupted, say, no, 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 hang on, let me finish. That level of confidence,
Yeah.
that could be very very worthwhile, right? In getting
Yeah.
their ideas out there.
Yeah, I feel like I still see a little bit of a hole in there too, though, especially with what you mentioned earlier, in that an extrovert is talking so much to get to discover their idea, right? Whereas an extrovert keeps it in more and kind of develops that idea by themselves and then puts it out there. By restricting the extrovert, are we not allowing them to get to their full idea then?
I
Again,
mean,
I'm still fighting with those ideas because overall, because on one side, yeah, we let the extroverts talk more, but then the extroverts can't even get to the point that they were trying to
the
make.
introverts, yeah.
Again, it's all give and take.
No,
Essentially what we're talking about is letting people do stuff or come to these ideas, come to the party with the way that they like to, uh, yeah, deliver.
yeah, yeah. So it's this whole idea, the golden rule, which is really fundamentally misguided, and it's been talked about a lot. This whole idea of do unto others as you would have done to you. This is a very silly idea. Really, the rule, I heard somebody call it the platinum rule once. It should be called the platinum rule, which is do unto others as they wish done to them, right? Treat others the way they want to be treated, not the way you want to be treated. As an extrovert, I would love people to just give me the floor for an hour, right? But
Mhm.
what that's how I want to be treated, but that's not how an introvert wants to be treated, right? So there's different ways to go about it. And I think you're right. There's extroverts need room, but let's be honest, right? Yeah, we need room to work out our ideas, but we go overboard. I mean, I'll work out my idea, and if you let me, if no one stops me, I
Mhm.
can just burn through. I mean, you and I do that right here. You and I literally have to cut each other off to have a conversation because either of us could do this on our own, and
Yeah.
that's not the point.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and also, and even with the conversation that we had yesterday, where I cut you off too because I just felt like we were going in a different direction, and because that's a big part of this too. Is like we all know it's not polite to cut people off, but again, like the example I gave you yesterday, if we're running a race this way, and when we start off, someone's going in the opposite direction, you do kind of got to stop them and say like, hey, wait, we're going this way, buddy. We're going this way, right? So, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I guess I honestly I kind of think this all just comes down to just trying to be mindful and kind, right?
I totally agree. It mindful and present, and I know that's kind of been
Yeah.
a kind of a one of these hashtaggy kind of
Yeah.
words over the last few years. But there's something really truthful at the bottom of that word, even though it's gotten co-opted by kind of the self help movement. But being present. And I'm not talking about like in this like weird kind of 21st century self help way, but simply being aware of how you are being perceived and how others are being perceived in the experience that you're sharing together is just a really, really valuable skill, because when you learn to do that, you will get your voice heard more. You will get other perspectives in more. And I think, yeah, like you said, it's fundamentally it's kind. I do
Mhm.
want to revisit something you had said 10, 15 minutes ago now, which is kind of where is the responsibility? It's
Mm.
is it enough to just give the space? And I think no, we have to go even further than that. I think we need to give the space, but we also need to, one, specifically encourage extroverts to offer their opinion, and we need to be the ones that shut down the other extroverts in the room who are
Yeah.
interrupting it. If an extrovert interrupts an introvert, you can turn to the extrovert and say, "Hey, hold on a second. Frank's talking right now, or Jane's talking right now. Give them a second to work out their thoughts." And I
Yeah.
think that is going to make the introverts in the room feel like, "Oh, I've got someone on my side. Like I can actually continue here."
Mm. Yeah, yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. Well, because another thing too that just has me thinking though, like, what is it a matter of just giving equal time for everyone to speak as well? Because, that sounds right on its face, but also there's pressure to being. I mean, as I have moments where I am introverted in certain
Mhm.
groups. That's another part of it too. And if someone pointed at me, okay, now it's your turn for ideas. As an introvert, I still kind of shrink, even though it's my opportunity to. So again, that's why I'm glad we're having this conversation, because it's not as easy as giving everyone equal time, or I mean, it is such a complicated. It's such a complicated problem that has answers that change depending on who you're with.
It's absolutely true. Everything with communication is contextual. It always is. In fact, I think next week we're going to be moving from this conversation into kind of a part two about listening in general. And so I'll save. I can feel like that's where this is actually leading right now. This is the point in this conversation where that's leading. So I'll leave that for next week. But there's a great point that was made. I read, oh gosh, I don't know, in a communication blog years ago that was such a good point, and it was about leadership communication, and basically saying the way most people approach kind of the leadership communication is they will give their opinion on the topic at hand, and then they'll say, "Now I want to hear from everybody."
Mm,
And you think that's the right thing to do, right? Because you give your thing and then you say, now everybody gets a chance. But it's like you said, how often do you do that? And it's silent. It's almost always silent. Why?
mm.
Because you already gave your opinion. And so now anybody with a different point of view is going to be nervous to share it. And anybody with the same point of view feels it's redundant. So the opposite, go ahead. I see
Or
it.
because they want to go home. I was
Or,
gonna
or,
say
because, or
that's
because they
quite
want to go
often.
home.
I want to get that joke in there, but
Sure.
that is kind of true. It's like,
But
oh, Susie's gonna make us stay here longer, or Brad's gonna make us stay here longer because they're gonna have another question.
so
Yeah,
that's totally fine. And that's something, it wouldn't have occurred to me because I've never actually worked, like when I'm talking about this stuff, these are voluntary groups and
yeah,
conversations
yeah.
I'm a part of. I'm not talking about work meetings,
Mm,
um but on the flip side, so this was saying was the way to do it is to do it the other way, to say the topic of the day is this. Before I share my thoughts, I'd like to hear from all of you, and then to give everybody space to share their perspective. And then what you get to do now, you haven't colored the conversation. You give everybody a chance to get their perspective, to get their point of view in, and at the end, as the leader, now you can be the one who synthesizes the room. Maybe there's two or three significantly different opinions. You can bring those together, and and then share your point of view at the end, bringing everybody's opinions into the fold, everybody's perspectives into the fold. And I think that is much more leadership than the other way.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I know, I totally agree. And I think that's kind of a good place to end it too. I guess one thing I'd kind of do to throw it back to the audience is I'd really like to know their perspective on this, and especially what they think is the best uh, call to action to try to get a somewhat equal, not necessarily an equal opportunity. Well, maybe an equal opportunity to be able to contribute, or an equal opportunity of openness for an opportunity to, because again, we don't want to force anyone to have to talk if they don't want to, but they shouldn't feel like they can't.
Exactly. That's a perfect place to end. We'll include some resources in the description. I'll include a link to Susan Cain's book, Quiet. Phenomenal read, really, really worthwhile, especially for artists and creatives. And I think I might have a blog post that I wrote at some point about on the topic. I'll include that if I can
Yeah.
find that. But next week we'll pick up the topic on listening. And
Mm.
until then,
On to the
on to the
next
next project.
project.